We can create a text box only when we're near an NPC, which is great, but we want each of the NPCs to say something different. Let's make that happen now. In your asset browser, find the parent object for NPCs that we created. It's obj par NPC. Double-click that to open it. We're going to use variable definitions again to make this possible. Click on variable definitions to open that panel. And if you recall, before we had created these two ones here called loop range 1 and loop range 2, let's click the add button to create a new one. And we're going to call it my text. Just like that. No spaces in the name, remember. For the type, let's choose string. Now remember, string is just text. And you can type in whatever you want into the default. I'm going to type y, comma, hello there. Very inventive. We'll be using this variable definition a little bit later to change what this says for each of our 3 NPCs. But for now, we just need to make sure that it exists. Next, let's go back to the player object and go to its key press space event. We're going to edit this a little further to make it a little more advanced. First, at the top of this event, we're going to add a new temporary variable. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to make a new line, and I'm going to type var underscore text. So sometimes you want to create a variable, but you don't want to do anything with it yet. You don't even want to declare a value. When you do that, you can just say var space and then type the name of the variable. The reason I'm putting an underscore before is just a code thing. It's just to let me know this is a temporary thing I'm probably only going to use in this event right here. And you can see that it gets highlighted yellow, so I know that it's a little bit different. Next, down here under the create a text box, we're going to just edit the title of this to say if NPC is nearby, just to be a bit more descriptive. And I'm going to add a new line under the if nearby NPC line. And we're going to say underscore text equals nearby NPC dot my text. Okay, let's go over a couple of things here. We're assigning a value to this text variable, which we just created here. We already know what that does. However, what's going on here? Well, in GameMaker Studio 2, we can often access the variables of other instances by typing the name of the instance, a period, and then after that, the name of the variable we want to check. If this variable doesn't exist, of course, we can get errors, but if it does exist, then we're good to go. Now, nearby NPC isn't an actual instance, or rather, what this instance is will change depending on which nearby NPC we have. So in this case, we're using nearby NPC to check for any instance of obj par NPC, which could be our baker, our teacher, or our grocer. When it does this, GameMaker Studio actually knows which exact instance it's looking at. And in this event, we can use that to say, okay, so since you know what nearby NPC is, find out what its myText variable is. So we just set this up. We just went to obj par NPC, and we created a variable definition that said myText and put in some default text here. If we don't change anything else, this is what we're going to see. But this is a handy way to basically look into other instances and get variables from them. So we need to complete what's going on here. Let's add a new line here. Let's edit this line, sorry. And we're going to type I equals. Okay, what's going on here? Well, if you recall, anytime we have a function on the right side of an equal sign, it means we are running this function, and then we are storing the value of this function inside whatever variable is on the left here. I is just something I made up. It doesn't mean anything. It's just, you'll notice it a lot in code. It's just a quick way to say basically an instance very quickly. And we're going to add one more line that says I dot text to show equals underscore text. Let's run the game to test this out, and then I'll explain further how this works. We'll go over to our teacher here. So now when we press the space bar, she says, "Why hello there," which is great. It's no longer saying that default text, if you recall. In OBJ text box, we have this variable called text to show in the create event. And previously, whenever we were popping up a text box, it was just displaying whatever the string was. What we're doing now is, in our player object, we are checking to see if we're beside an NPC. If so, we are looking for whatever variable is stored in that NPC under my text. And we're storing that in this temporary variable called underscore text. Then we're making sure that a text box does not already exist, same as before. We are creating a text box, and because we also want to do something to this text box, we are storing whatever the ID of that text box is immediately in this little variable we've created here called I. Then we are saying, okay, go to I, which is whatever this text box is, and then change its variable, text to show, to whatever we stored up here in text. That may sound complicated, but all we're doing is we are looking at a variable in another instance, we are creating a text box instance, and then we are assigning the value of that variable to that new text box instance. You'll use this a whole lot to create something and then immediately make a change to that instance. And as we can see when we run the game, and whatever is in an NPC's myText variable definition is the text that we'll see when we go next to that NPC and press the spacebar. To show you further what I mean, let's go ahead and edit each one of these 3 NPCs. So I'll edit the teacher first, and I will click on variable definitions, and where it says my text, I'm going to click the edit button to override that, and let's change this text. I'm the teacher, and what are you doing out of class? Whatever you want. Now let's go to the baker. Click on variable definitions again, and we'll edit the value for my text for the baker. And I'll change this to I sure love baking bread. And let's just go ahead and run our game. So right now we can only have one text box up at a time, so I'll just have to run the game a couple of times to test. If we press space here, aha, I'm the teacher, and what are you doing out of class? So now we're getting the teacher's very specific my text string that was in her variable definition. We'll go to the grocer. We'll click on variable definitions. We will override that my text variable definition. And we'll change this to say, good crops this year. And we'll run our game again. Now I'll walk up to the baker here. Hello. I sure love baking bread. That's good. So we're seeing the specific text for the baker's my text variable definition as well. Let's close this. We'll go to the grocer. We'll click on variable definitions. We will override that my text variable definition. And we'll change this to say, good crops this year. And we'll run our game again. We'll walk over to the grocer now. Hello. Good crops this year. So he's now saying his specific my text variable definition text as well. That's great. We can go ahead and close this. So I know that's a lot to do at once, but hopefully you understand what we're doing here is using variable definitions and using these temporary variables in the player object to essentially feed one variable from one object into another to create text that's unique to each character. Make sure to save your project at this point because we've got a lot more to do.